Today, I would like to tell you something about the future. Future is something that we all find interesting, of course, very interesting. But we don't even know if the future exists. What is the future? We never touch the future. We cannot experiment on the future. We just know the past because we remember it. And from the past we extrapolate into the future. But we never really know what the future will be. We use various methods. My ancestors, maybe long ago, here in Tuscany, they were diviners, they were priests, and they used the flight of birds, lightning, and the livers of sacrificed animals to explore the future. I not say that their ways were worse than ours, but we don't do that anymore. Of course, we don't. But we use still heuristic methods, because the future cannot be known with certainty. The best we can do is to imagine it in the form of different possibilities, different scenarios, a fan of scenarios. This is what the authors of this book, The Limits to Growth, did in 1972. They tried to see the future in 50 years from now, from that time. Now for us. And they didn't seek prediction. They realized, hey, we cannot predict the future. We can only tell you that if we do something or don't do something else, the future could be like this. And if you take it as a prediction, they predicted something very bad for 50 years later, more or less where we stand now, and the situation is indeed very bad. If that was a prediction, it was good, but things always change. The future remains always unknowable, and I would like to tell you something more. You see, this is a scientific way of predicting the future, but there are other ways, and I will tell you of a story that I read long ago, more than 50 years ago. And let me show you something. This book is in Italian, as you can see, Destination Universe, very thick book, as you can see, published in 1959. Now imagine you take this book and you give it as a birthday gift to an 8-year-old boy. What is the result? And that's, I think, one of the reasons why I'm so interested in the future, and that I do scenarios, I do calculations, do a lot of things, but eventually the future remains obscure, and we do our best to imagine it, and in imagining it, telling ourselves stories. Our brain works in terms of stories. So let me tell you one story from this book, and it is this story. In Italian is titled Fuga nel Tempo. In English, I think the original title was something like A Star Above It, by the science fiction writer Chad Oliver. Chad Oliver was not a professional writer. He was a university professor in anthropology. He was smart. He had a lot of knowledge about ancient civilizations, so he was doing something similar to The Limits to Growth, but he was doing this in a narrative way, directly into the narrative. So you see, this story, the front page has horses on it, and the story deals with the ancient Aztecs. So what do horses have to do with the ancient Aztecs? That's a good question, because you know the story of the Aztecs, the native inhabitants of Mexico, and they were defeated and mostly exterminated by the Spanish at the time of the leader, conqueror Hernan Cortés. You know the story of Montezuma, the leader of the Aztecs, all that. Now, we can make scenarios of the future also for the past. It's an exercise. We do this, saying, what would it have happened if? That's the beauty of studying the future, even a future which is in the past. It's an idea. So Chad Oliver, who is an anthropologist, asked himself why were the Aztecs wiped out so easily by just a few Spaniards? And because the Spaniards had muskets, iron weapons, and also horses. Horses? Let's imagine the Aztecs had horses. Well, they didn't have horses because the horses disappeared, probably exterminated by humans from the North American continent thousands of years before. But let's imagine, and this is science fiction, that we can travel in time, back in time, and so we can go back to the time of the Aztecs and maybe change something. This is a typical trope of science fiction. Typically, it's about paradoxes, that you go back in time with a time machine and you kill your grandfather when he was a child. And this causes such a break in the fabric of the universe, or the space-time, or the universe, that the whole thing, boom, goes bang, and we all disappear. But let's build up narratives of this. So Chad Oliver imagines that time travel is developed in our future, and that there is an agency charged to make sure that time travelers do not tamper with the past in such a way to destroy the present. Logic. And so what happens? At some moment, this agency discovers something very strange. So what's happening in Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztec Empire, they detect the presence of horses. Horses in Mexico, what's happening? And they patch up what's happened. Another time traveler, another professor, has used the time machine to travel back to the time of the Aztecs, some 100 years before the time of Hernan Cortés, the destruction of the empire, and bringing horses with him. Big problem. How now? They realize immediately, as if this man brings horses to the Aztecs, they will develop not just weapons, cavalry, but also they will have a much more stable and linked empire, because they have these horses, a means of transportation and communication. So they could be much better at contrasting the Spanish invasion than they actually were in the history we know. And so they say, what are we doing? Then they consider whether they could bomb the horses and helicopters or things, but that doesn't work so well. It's expensive, and they are not sure that they are not doing more damage than it has been already done. So they decide to send one man, sort of secret agent, but not like 007 James Bond. It's a very interesting story, because this man is chosen, and it is a big mission that they charge him with. They say, okay, you have to go to back in time and stop this other man, from destroying us. And in order to do that, he has to do things. He has to pass for an Aztec. He has to learn the Nahuatl, the language of the ancient Aztec. He has to learn everything about the Aztecs to pass as an Aztec. And he does that. He's changed. He's absorbed in this knowledge of the Aztec civilization, which he starts appreciating. But anyway, he has a sense of duty, so he goes. He learns all that, goes to Tenochtitlan, dressed as a priest, an Aztec priest, goes to see the high priest of the big temple of Tenochtitlan, and he started telling him a story. Say, well, it's these horses are dangerous. You don't know what could happen. It's very smart. He could say, "Oi, if these horses look nice, but as soon that they become common, then they could threaten your power as priests." That's smart. So the priest looks at him, sort of convinced, but okay, he does that. This first step. Then he goes to see the other man, the other university professor, who actually brought the horses in Tenochtitlan, and goes to see him. dressed as a priest. Hello, I'm a priest. No, you're not a priest. I am a priest. No, I know who you are. You are an agent from the time travel agency. Oh, okay. How do you know? Well, I was working for them just as you are doing, and I know their methods. I know that they would send somebody, an agent, to stop me. And I'm sure that you went to see the high priest and you told them something about the danger of these horses, right? And he remains surprised. Yes, I did. He says, but I know the way you act, and the priests knew what to expect from you. And there is a moment, a dramatic moment. It's very, very well written, this story. He says, but why are you doing this? You're destroying our civilization, my civilization, your civilization, at the same time. And he said, well, see, Wade, that's the name of the man of the secret agents. It's just a very simple reason. I fell in love. I fell in love for an Aztec girl. And but you're destroying an entire civilization for an Aztec girl. No, I'm not destroying a civilization. What right do you think you have, independently of my girlfriend? What right do you have to exist? And you deny this right to the Aztecs. So there's no reason to prefer your civilization, my civilization, to the Aztec civilization. So I'm doing what I'm doing because I fell in love and I want to help my girlfriend to save her descendants. And I didn't just bring horses. And what else did you bring? I brought a gun, a rifle. And then you have this dramatic scene that the girl, or the woman of the antagonist, armed with a gun, there is this moment of confrontation in which, at this point, it's a little bit James Bond-like, because he runs away, the girl shoots him, but she misses him. That's probably she was not very good at shooting people. And so there follows a kinematic story in which the horses run away, and then a lot of noise, and then the protagonist managed to get back wounded to our age, to his age. And eventually he's told, okay, apparently you did something good because the horses disappeared. And the reason is maybe they did the right thing, or maybe they were scared of these horses running wild, or maybe something. But eventually, I think it is understood that the priests were very conservative. They didn't want any change in their society. They didn't realize that by refusing change, they were condemning their society to doom, which happened about 100 years later. Just like our priests. We don't have priests engaged in human sacrifice as in Aztec times, but not directly, at least. It's a long story, but our priests, our leaders, do not want changes, and that's the same story, because refusing to change, they are probably condemning our society to doom. But in a certain sense, it is what it has to be, because the final scene of this story is when the protagonist goes to see the stars. The title is A Star Above It. It says, well, he realizes, well, we are sitting here, our civilization, we people of the 21st century, pushing the ground under our feet, the bones and the ashes of hundreds of ancient civilizations which had to die, to disappear, because we had to arise. And he lives, the author, the Chad Oliver, lived in an optimistic time. So he says, well, we can justify this if we explore space, develop big scientific discoveries and things. And so maybe, just maybe, we deserve it, but we must work to deserve it. Seeing now, it is a different story, because our civilization is in such a bad shape that you could argue that really the Aztecs would have deserved to live much more than we do. But so is the story. And one basic feature of history is that everything that happens or has happened happens because of something that happened before. So we are facing the future and moving into it without knowing it and without really knowing what we are doing. Maybe our destiny will be the same as that of the Aztec civilization, and in a certain sense, in that case, it means we deserved it. Or maybe not, we cannot say. In any case, the fascination of the future remains with us. And after all, it doesn't take much of an effort to discover the future because we just move into it, no matter what we do. And thank you very much for your attention.